Today we are doing brakes on a Tesla Model S. I figured we could do like an unboxing brake pad video. This car's getting brake pads and rotors all the way around. So here is the front brake pad box. It comes in a white box. This is right from Tesla Motors. And what we have in here, we have 4 brake pads, a set of 4 shims, and 2 tubes of grease, all from Brembo. So Brembo makes the brakes on this car. They look very similar to Porsche brakes, very, very similar. I opened the grease, and the grease that's used is this copper color style of grease. So it's kind of like that copper brown. Okay, so we put grease on this edge, we clean the caliper. We can also put a little tiny bit of grease in where the caliper, where the brake pad pins go through, just to hold those hold the brake pad into position. Then there is going to be a shim that goes over that. And so this is actually a fabric shim right here. So this metal surface and this metal surface will have a very thin layer of grease, because that's a metal-to-metal surface, but the surface that actually touches the piston of the caliper, this surface, is not gonna have any grease applied. So contact point and metal-to-metal inner surface only. Something to note here on luxury cars, usually there's a brake pad, an electronic brake pad wear sensor. BMW and Mercedes came out with this 30 or 40 years ago. This car, the Tesla, does not have it. It has just an old-fashioned squealer. So what happens is when the brake pad wears down, so this is the friction material, from this point to this point is the friction material. And as the friction material wears down, the brake disc will finally come into contact with this squealer, and that squealer will make a ringing noise while you hit the brakes. That means it's time to get brakes on your car. So there is no warning on the dash that will indicate when you need brake pads, because there is no brake pad sensor. There's no electronic brake pad sensor. Now here is the rear brake pad kit. We have a set of shims. And a set of pads here. Okay, so same thing with the front, a little bit different. There's no material surface where the caliper comes into contact. So any metal to metal surface, we are going to apply the grease to. And actually they don't give you any grease in the rear brake pad kit, but we're gonna make sure that we use high temp grease. This shim hangs over this edge like so. The same thing, no electronic brake pad sensor, but there is this brake pad sensor. As this pad wears down, the disc comes into contact with that little metal squealer, they call it, and it squeals, makes an audible noise. Time to get brakes. Let's the driver know that it's time to get brakes. Okay, so we have this vehicle in service mode, and we've already loosened. We need to remove the parking brake caliper. This is the parking brake caliper, and this is the actual brake caliper. We've loosened the bolts that hold the parking brake caliper on, but the caliper will not come off because the lip of the old rotor is too big, and the pads won't squeeze over the top of it. So right now I'm trying to pull this guy off, and it won't come off. We could probably force it, but why would we do that? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove the back of the motor, we're gonna loosen the piston, and it's gonna retract the pad, and then this is gonna come right back off. We're then gonna reinstall the motor. This one right here, okay. We removed the 3 bolts that hold this rear motor on, and then a 14mm box or open end wrench goes in there, and it spins the bolt. You're gonna turn it clockwise. So what you're doing is you're pulling this pad, the inner pad, back into its fully seated position. Once that happens, the caliper just lifts right back off. So I'll give you a demo here. So the caliper just goes on and off. No problem, goes right up over the lip edges. And then we're just gonna go put that guy back together. Beautiful. Now I'll take that guy. To note, there is factory blue Loctite on these 3 screws that hold the motor on. You can see the new pads and rotors are on the rear of this Tesla. The parking brake caliper is back reinstalled. So in summary, what we did to remove this and reinstall it, we just removed the 3 screws that hold the motor on, and then we took a 14mm open end box end wrench, and then we screwed the center bolt in, which pulled the brake pad in, which then allowed it to get over the ridge that was on the original brake disc, and then it allows us to get over a brand new brake disc. So that's all set. The motor, the 3 bolts on the motor are back on. When we engage the parking brake, it will reset the parking brake. So when it grabs, it knows. It uses a load sensor value, so it's watching amp draw with how many amps the motor is pulling to screw this brake pad assembly and pinch, take this caliper and pinch the disc. And by how many amps has drawn from the motor, it knows that it's reached a limit. And then when you go to turn the parking brake off, all it does is just back off like, a half a revolution, because it just pulls the pad back just a little tiny bit. So it watches for an amp draw when you apply the parking brake, and when there's a super high amp draw, it stops applying, and then it just holds it. Then it releases it by just unscrewing it. So we essentially just unscrewed the bolt that holds the pad in. This car is going to drive safely down the road again.